blood pooled on the checkered linoleum, a stark, violent red against the black and white. A room full of people sat frozen, pretending not to see a dying man. Everyone knew who Dominic Castellano was, and everyone knew that helping him meant a death sentence. But Chloe didn't care about mob politics. She just saw a fading pulse. The rain in Chicago that night didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to punish the city. At the Starlight Diner in the South Loop, the neon sign sputtered, casting a sickly pink glow over the half-empty parking lot. Inside, it was a slow Tuesday. Chloe Bennett wiped down the laminate counter for the fourth time, the smell of industrial bleach masking the scent of stale coffee and fryer grease. She was 24, exhausted, and running on 3 hours of sleep. Her manager, Brenda, was in the back counting the till. The only patrons were Dave Riley, a local plumber nursing a black coffee in booth 2, and a couple of college kids in the far corner staring at their phones. The heavy glass door swung open with a violent crash. The bell above it didn't just ring, it shrieked. A man stumbled over the threshold. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a charcoal bespoke suit that probably cost more than Chloe made in a year. But the suit was ruined. The left side of his chest and abdomen was soaked in a dark, spreading stain. He took 2 agonizing steps, his leather shoes slipping on the wet floor, before he collapsed against booth 4, dragging a ketchup bottle and a napkin dispenser down with him. The diner went dead silent. The college kids bolted up, their faces pale. Dave Riley froze, his coffee cup suspended halfway to his mouth. Brenda rushed out from the back office, her eyes widening in sheer terror. She grabbed Chloe by the arm, her grip bruising. "Don't move," Brenda hissed, her voice trembling. "Do you know who that is?" Chloe stared at the man. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and rain. He was gasping, his lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. "That's Dominic Castellano," Dave Riley whispered from his booth, sliding down in his seat as if trying to merge with the synthetic leather. "Head of the Castellano family. If he's bleeding out here, the men who did it aren't far behind. We don't see anything. We don't do anything." It was an unwritten rule of the city's underworld. You do not interfere in syndicate business. If a boss falls, you look away, lest you become collateral damage in the inevitable war. But Chloe watched Dominic's chest heave. She heard a sickening, wet whistling sound every time he tried to draw breath. She recognized that sound. Before the diner, before her life had derailed, Chloe had been in her 3rd year at Northwestern Memorial's nursing program. She knew a tension pneumothorax when she heard one. A bullet had punctured his lung, and air was trapped in his chest cavity, crushing his heart. If he didn't get pressure relieved in the next 3 minutes, Dominic Castellano would die on the sticky floor of the Starlight Diner. "Let him go," Brenda pleaded, pulling Chloe backward. "The cops will come." "He doesn't have time for the cops," Chloe said. She yanked her arm out of Brenda's grip. Stepping out from behind the counter, Chloe walked toward the bleeding mobster. The silence in the diner was deafening, broken only by the storm outside and Dominic's wet, rattling breaths. She knelt beside him. Up close, his face was striking sharp jawline, a straight, aristocratic nose, and eyes that were a piercing, stormy gray. Those eyes flickered open, locking onto hers with the ferocious intensity of a cornered predator. He weakly raised a hand, his fingers coated in his own blood, as if to push her away. "Don't move," Chloe commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. "You have a collapsed lung. You're suffocating." She didn't wait for his permission. Chloe ripped open his ruined silk shirt, popping the expensive buttons. The entry wound was just below his collarbone. The tissue was bubbling. "Brenda," Chloe yelled, her authority cutting through the diner's panic. "Bring me the first aid kit, the bottle of cheap vodka under the counter, and a stainless steel milkshake straw. Now." Brenda stood paralyzed. "Now, Brenda. Or, I swear to God, you'll have a murder investigation shutting down this diner for a month." That spurred the manager into action. Seconds later, Brenda slid a dusty plastic kit, a bottle of Smirnoff, and a thick metal straw across. Chloe grabbed a paring knife from her apron pocket. She used it to cut lemons and uncap the vodka, pouring it over the blade and her own hands. Dominic was fading, his eyes rolling back. "This is going to hurt," Chloe muttered, leaning over him. She pinpointed the second intercostal space on his chest, mid-clavicular line. "Stay with me." With a swift, precise motion, she made a small incision through his skin and muscle. Dominic let out a guttural groan, his body arching off the floor. Blood welled up, but Chloe didn't hesitate. She took the sterilized metal milkshake straw and forced it into the incision, pushing past the ribs and into the pleural space. A loud hiss of trapped air released instantly, spraying a fine mist of blood. Dominic gasped, a massive, greedy intake of oxygen. The blue tint around his lips immediately began to recede. His chest rose and fell with sudden, frantic normalcy. He gripped Chloe's wrist, his large, blood-stained fingers wrapping around her delicate bones. He wasn't pushing her away anymore. He was holding on to her like an anchor, his stormy eyes locked onto her name tag. "Chloe!" he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. Before Chloe could respond, the screech of tires echoed outside. 3 black SUVs aggressively jumped the curb, their headlights flooding the diner. Doors slammed. "They're here to finish him," Dave panicked, crawling under his table. 4 men in dark suits burst through the door, weapons drawn. The leader, a man with a scarred cheek and ruthless eyes. Leo Russo, Dominic's enforcer, swept the room with a Glock 19. When he saw Dominic on the floor with a waitress kneeling over him holding a bloody knife, he raised his weapon straight at Chloe's head. "Step away from him!" Leo roared. Chloe froze. The cold reality of a gun barrel pointed at her face, finally breaking her adrenaline-fueled focus. Dominic shifted, coughing violently. He raised his hand, a universal signal to stand down. "Lower the gun." "Leo," Dominic ordered, his voice weak but laced with undeniable authority. "She didn't. She saved my life." Leo hesitated, then holstered the weapon, rushing to his boss's side. The other men quickly secured the perimeter and hoisted Dominic up. "Get him to the private clinic," Leo barked. As they carried Dominic out, the mob boss turned his head, his gaze burning into Chloe one last time before the diner doors swung shut. Leo lingered for a fraction of a second. He pulled out a thick wad of cash, tossing it onto the blood-soaked table nearest to the door. "You didn't see anything. Nobody was here." Then, they were gone. The only proof that the most powerful man in Chicago's underworld had just been there was the metallic smell of blood, a bloody milkshake straw, and $10,000 sitting beside a spilled cup of coffee. 3 days had passed, and the ghost of Dominic Castellano still haunted the Starlight Diner. Brenda had scrubbed the floor with bleach until her hands cracked, but Chloe could still see the phantom red stain near booth 4. The police had eventually showed up that night, responding to a noise complaint from a neighbor. Brenda and Dave had stuck to the script. A drunk guy stumbled in, fell, and left. Chloe had kept her mouth shut, pocketing her share of the hush money with trembling hands. She needed the money more desperately than anyone knew. Chloe's life hadn't always been serving greasy food on the graveyard shift. She had been top of her class at Northwestern, but her younger brother, Liam, had a talent for finding the worst people in Chicago. A year ago, Liam had developed a serious gambling addiction and racked up a massive debt. To save him from having his legs broken, Chloe had emptied her tuition savings, dropped out of school, and taken double shifts. But Liam hadn't learned his lesson. 3 weeks ago, he vanished completely, leaving behind a trashed apartment and a cryptic voicemail begging Chloe not to look for him. Her life was a tightrope of anxiety, and saving a Mafia Don had just added a crosswind. At 2 a.m. on a Friday, Chloe ended her shift. She pulled her worn peacoat tightly around her, stepping out into the biting Chicago wind. She lived 5 blocks away, in a crumbling walk-up. The streets were deserted. As she turned the corner onto her street, a pair of headlights suddenly flared to life in the alleyway. Chloe's heart slammed into her ribs. She stopped. A black Lincoln Continental idled heavily, blocking the sidewalk. The rear door clicked open, and a man stepped out. It was Leo Russo, the enforcer with the scarred cheek. "Miss Bennett," Leo said. It wasn't a greeting, it was a summons. "Get in." Chloe's instinct was to run, but she knew better. You don't outrun men like Leo. Swallowing her terror, she approached the car and slid into the leather interior. It smelled of expensive cologne and gun oil. They drove in silence for 40 minutes, leaving the gritty city behind and entering the manicured, sprawling estates of Lake Forest. The car passed through heavy wrought iron gates, crunching over a long gravel driveway until it stopped before a massive stone mansion. Chloe was escorted inside by Leo, led through a grand foyer with marble floors and vaulted ceilings. They entered a dimly lit study lined with dark mahogany bookshelves and a roaring fireplace. Sitting in a high-backed leather wing chair was Dominic Castellano. He looked entirely different from the dying man on the diner floor. He wore a crisp, white button-down, though he moved with a stiff caution that betrayed his recent injury. A glass of amber liquid sat on the table beside him. When Chloe entered, his eyes, those same piercing, stormy gray eyes, locked onto her. "Leave us, Leo," Dominic said. Leo nodded and stepped out, closing the heavy oak doors behind him. The click of the latch sounded like a vault ceiling. "Chloe Bennett," Dominic said, his voice smooth, resonant, and entirely terrifying in its calmness. "Have a seat." She remained standing, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "I prefer to stand." A ghost of a smile touched Dominic's lips. "You're not afraid of me. Or, you are, but you're pretending very well. That takes a certain kind of nerve." "I just want to know why I'm here," Chloe said, her voice tight. "I didn't say anything to the police. I did exactly what your man told me to do." Dominic shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. "I know. My men have been watching you for 3 days. You went to work, you went home, you bought groceries, you didn't breathe a word. But that's not why you're here." He gestured to a black leather briefcase resting on the coffee table. "Open it." Chloe hesitated, then stepped forward and popped the latches. Inside were stacks of $100 bills, neatly banded. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. 200,000, Dominic stated. "For your quick thinking. The surgeon at my clinic said that if you hadn't decompressed my chest exactly when you did, my heart would have stopped 2 minutes later. I owe you my life. A Castellano always pays his debts." Chloe stared at the money. It was more than enough to pay off any debt Liam had. It was enough to go back to nursing school. It was freedom in a box. Slowly, she closed the lid. She clicked the latches shut and pushed the briefcase back across the glass table. Dominic frowned, a genuine look of confusion crossing his features. "Is it not enough?" "It's blood money," Chloe said evenly, "and I don't want it." Dominic's eyes narrowed. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "No one refuses a gift from me, Miss Bennett. It's considered incredibly insulting." "I'm not refusing," Chloe countered, her heart pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. "I want to negotiate." Silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Dominic leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, ignoring the pain in his chest. "You want to negotiate with a mafia boss? You saved my life, Chloe, but do not mistake that for invincibility. What could you possibly want that is worth more than $250,000? "A favor," Chloe said, looking him dead in the eye. "My younger brother, Liam. He's an idiot who thinks he can play with the big boys. He disappeared 3 weeks ago. The police won't look for him because he's an adult with a record. But I know he didn't just run away. He owes money." "To whom?" Dominic asked, his tone shifting from mildly amused to sharply focused. "A man named Silas Moretti," Chloe breathed, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Dominic went completely still. The silence in the room became suffocating. When he finally spoke, his voice was a lethal whisper. "Silas Moretti." Dominic stood up, ignoring his injury, pacing to the fireplace. He stared into the flames. "Your brother took a loan from the Moretti syndicate?" "Yes," Chloe said, trembling slightly. "Do you know him?" Dominic turned to face her, the firelight casting harsh shadows across his sharp features. "Know him? Silas Moretti is the man who put the bullet in my chest 3 nights ago." Chloe gasped, taking a step back. The realization hit her like a physical blow. By saving Dominic, she hadn't just done a good deed. She had actively interfered in a mob war, saving the sworn enemy of the man who held her brother captive. "It seems, Miss Bennet," Dominic said, walking slowly toward her until he was mere inches away, his towering frame forcing her to look up, "that our fates are more entangled than either of us realized." He looked down at her, his stormy eyes burning with a sudden, dark intensity. "Keep the money. I'm going to find your brother, but in return, you're going to stay right here, under my roof." "What?" "No," Chloe protested, her panic rising. "I have a job. I have a life." "Silas knows that I survived," Dominic interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And he will find out exactly how I survived. When he learns that a waitress from the South Loop robbed him of his victory, he won't just kill you. He will make an example out of you. You belong to the Castellano family now, Chloe. Until Silas Moretti is dead, you are mine to protect." The Castellano estate was a fortress disguised as a Renaissance masterpiece. For 4 days, Chloe Bennet had been a prisoner within its sprawling, gilded walls. She was given the East Wing guest suite, a room larger than her entire apartment, featuring a clawfoot tub, a king-sized bed draped in Egyptian cotton, and a balcony overlooking a meticulously manicured rose garden. But the heavy mahogany door was always guarded by 2 of Dominic's men. She was allowed to roam the house, provided she had an escort. Usually, it was Leo. The stoic enforcer rarely spoke, his scarred face an impenetrable mask as he trailed 3 steps behind her. Chloe felt like a ghost haunting a billionaire's life. She wore clothes provided by Clara, the estate's elderly, tight-lipped housekeeper, expensive silk loungewear, and cashmere sweaters that felt alien against her skin. Every afternoon, she sat in the grand library, staring at the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows, her mind racing with thoughts of Liam. Was he freezing in an alley? Was he already dead at the hands of Silas Moretti? The anxiety was a living thing in her chest, gnawing at her ribs. Her only distraction was her patient. Dominic Castellano was a terrible patient. On the 5th evening, Chloe walked into the study, flanked by Leo. Dominic was seated behind a massive oak desk, surrounded by blueprints and scattered files. He was aggressively typing on a sleek laptop, his jaw clenched tight. He still wore a crisp dress shirt, but the top 3 buttons were undone, revealing the edge of the thick white bandages Chloe changed daily. "You're supposed to be on bed rest," Chloe said, crossing her arms. The power dynamic between them was strange. He was a terrifying mob boss who commanded legions of dangerous men, but she was the only one who dared to tell him what to do. Dominic didn't look up from the screen. "Rest is a luxury I cannot afford right now, Miss Bennet. The Moretti Syndicate has taken over 2 of our supply warehouses in the West Loop since I was sidelined. They smell blood in the water. If you tear your internal stitches, there will be literal blood in the water." Chloe shot back, walking around the desk. "You're breathing shallowly. You're in pain." Dominic finally stopped typing. He leaned back in his leather chair, the leather groaning under his weight. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his stormy gray eyes standing out starkly against his pale skin. "Then fix it, Nurse Bennet." Chloe sighed, stepping closer. The scent of him sandalwood, dark coffee, and something inherently dangerous wrapped around her. She motioned for him to sit forward. Reluctantly, he obeyed. As she carefully unbuttoned his shirt to inspect the dressings, her fingers brushed against the warm, hard plane of his chest. Dominic's breath hitched slightly, a microscopic reaction, but one that sent a jolt of electricity up Chloe's arm. "The incision site is healing clean," she murmured, her voice losing its sharp edge. She taped down a fresh piece of gauze. "But you are pushing yourself too hard. Have you found anything about Liam?" Dominic's eyes darkened. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently wrapping around her wrist, stopping her movements. The touch was branding. "I have men tearing the city apart, Chloe, but Silas is keeping him hidden, for a reason. Your brother isn't just a degenerate gambler. He stumbled into something." "Like what?" Chloe asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 weeks ago, Liam was seen at a high-stakes underground poker game run by one of Silas's lieutenants, A man named Arthur Gable, Dominic explained, releasing her wrist and picking up a file from the desk. He handed it to her. Inside was a grainy surveillance photo of Liam, looking terrified, sitting at a card table. Liam didn't just lose money, he lost a specific drive, a ledger containing offshore accounts belonging to the Moretti family. He thought he could steal it to pay off his debt. Instead, he made himself the most wanted man in Chicago. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. Liam stole from the Mafia? He's a dead man. Not yet, Dominic said softly, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. Silas needs the encryption key to open those files. If Liam hasn't given it up, he's still alive. And I intend to find him. Why? Chloe asked, searching his face. You owe me your life. Yes. But going to war over a waitress's brother? It doesn't make sense for a man like you. Dominic stood up slowly. He towered over her, the proximity suddenly suffocating but intoxicating. He reached up, his knuckles grazing her cheek, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Because you saved me when everyone else would have let me bleed out on a diner floor. Because you looked down the barrel of Leo's gun and didn't flinch. In my world, loyalty is currency. And you, Chloe, are the rarest thing I've ever encountered. Before Chloe could process the weight of his words, the heavy study doors banged open. Vincent Rossi, one of Dominic's top underbosses, strode into the room. He was a slick, sharp-featured man with an expensive tailored suit and a nervous energy that Chloe instantly disliked. Boss, Vincent said, stopping short when he saw how close Dominic was to Chloe. He cleared his throat. We have a break. One of Arthur Gable's men talked. They're holding the kid at the old shipyard on Navy Pier. Warehouse 42. Dominic's demeanor instantly shifted from intimate to lethal. The mob boss was back. Is the intel solid, Vincent? Solid as concrete? Vincent grinned, a predatory flash of teeth. Silas isn't there. Just a skeleton crew. We hit them tonight. We get the kid. And we send a message that the Castellano family isn't crippled. Dominic stared at the map on his desk. Assemble the strike team. Leo takes point. We leave in 20 minutes. I'm going with you, Chloe blurted out. Both men turned to look at her. Vincent laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. Right. The waitress is going to ride shotgun. Absolutely not, Dominic commanded, his tone final. You stay here where it's safe. He's my brother, Dominic. Chloe grabbed his arm, her grip desperate. If he's hurt, he'll need medical attention. You said it yourself. Silas's men have had him for weeks. He won't trust your men. He will panic. Let me go. I'll stay in the car. Dominic looked at her, seeing the fierce, unyielding determination in her eyes. He cursed under his breath. Fine. You stay in the armored SUV with Leo. If you open the door, I will personally lock you in the estate's wine cellar for the rest of the year. The rain had turned into a thick, freezing fog rolling off Lake Michigan by the time the convoy of 3 black SUVs killed their headlights near the abandoned shipyard. The smell of salt, rust, and decaying fish hung heavy in the air. Chloe sat in the back of the lead vehicle, her hands clamped together so tightly her knuckles were white. Beside her, Leo checked the magazine of his rifle with terrifying efficiency. Up front, Dominic sat in the passenger seat, a heavy trench coat concealing the Kevlar vest he wore over his bandages. Warehouse 42 is 50 yards out, the driver murmured. Comms check, Dominic said into the radio at his collar. Affirmative clicks echoed in his earpiece from the men in the trailing vehicles. He turned to look at Chloe in the back seat. Do not move. I mean it, Chloe. She nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Dominic and Leo slipped out of the vehicle, disappearing into the thick fog like shadows. The silence of the car was deafening. Chloe watched the digital clock on the dashboard. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Suddenly, the night shattered. It wasn't a tactical breach. It was an ambush. The deafening roar of automatic gunfire ripped through the shipyard, echoing off the corrugated metal of the warehouses. The sky lit up with the muzzle flashes. Chloe screamed as a stray bullet shattered the rear windshield of the SUV, raining safety glass over her shoulders. The driver shouted into his radio. "It's a trap! We have multiple bogies on the roof!" Over the radio frequency, Chloe heard Dominic's voice, tight and breathless. "Fall back! They were waiting for us! It's an ambush!" Through the fog, Chloe saw figures moving frantically. A body dropped near the rusted hull of a dry-docked boat. It was one of Castellano's men. "We need to get to the boss!" the driver yelled, throwing the SUV into drive. He peeled forward, the tires screaming on the wet pavement, barreling toward the entrance of Warehouse 42. As they neared the doors, a massive explosion rocked the foundation of the building. The shockwave threw the heavy SUV sideways, slamming it into a stack of shipping containers. Chloe's head snapped back, her vision spotting with black stars. "Hey, kid, are you alive?" Chloe blinked, coughing on the acrid smoke filling the cabin. The driver was slumped over the wheel, blood pooling from a head wound. The passenger door was violently wrenched open. It was Leo. His face was covered in soot, and he was bleeding heavily from a graze on his shoulder. "Out! We have to move! The car is going to burn!" He hauled Chloe out by her jacket, dragging her behind the steel barricade of the shipping containers. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and burning rubber. Gunfire pinned them down, sparking off the metal inches above their heads. "Where is Dominic?" Chloe screamed over the noise, panic clawing at her throat. "He's pinned inside the warehouse," Leo shouted, returning fire with his handgun. It was a setup. The intel was fake. "Vincent," Chloe breathed, realization hitting her like a freight train. "Vincent set you up." Leo's jaw locked. "I'll kill that rat bastard myself." Suddenly, the gunfire from the roof stopped. The heavy, reinforced doors of Warehouse 42 groaned open. Out of the smoke stepped a man in a pristine camel hair overcoat, flanked by a dozen heavily armed men. Silas Moretti. He was older than Dominic, with slicked-back silver hair and the cold, dead eyes of a shark, and they were dragging two people out with them. One was Liam. He was battered, his face swollen and unrecognizable, but he was alive. The other was Dominic. The mob boss was on his knees, his hands bound behind his back, blood seeping through his trench coat where his fresh stitches had undoubtedly torn. "Cease fire!" Silas's voice boomed over a megaphone, echoing through the shipyard. "Castellano men, your boss is on his knees. Drop your weapons, or I put a bullet in his skull right now." The remaining Castellano men, scattered behind cover, slowly lowered their weapons. Leo cursed violently, but he too dropped his gun, raising his hands. Chloe's heart plummeted into her stomach. She watched as Silas circled Dominic, a smug, vicious smile on his face. "Dominic, Dominic," Silas taunted, tapping the barrel of his silver revolver against Dominic's cheek. "You should have died in that diner. You surviving was a minor inconvenience, but Vincent was kind enough to correct the timeline for me." Vincent Rossi stepped out from the shadows of the warehouse, standing beside Silas. He wouldn't meet Dominic's eyes. "You always were a coward, Vincent," Dominic spat, his voice remarkably steady despite the blood loss. He looked up at Silas. "You have me. Let the boy go. He's of no use to you." "Ah, the boy." Silas chuckled, gesturing to Liam, who was whimpering on the ground. "He's the bait. But he's not the prize." Vincent told me a very interesting story. He told me about a waitress, a pretty little nurse dropout who played God and stitched you back together. Silas scanned the shipyard, his dead eyes searching the shadows. "I know you brought her, Dominic." "You've gone soft," Silas yelled into the dark. "Bring the girl out, or I start taking pieces off your boss right here." Dominic's eyes widened in genuine terror for the first time. "No! Chloe, run! Get out of here!" Leo grabbed Chloe's arm, pulling her backward into the fog. "We have to go. Now." But Chloe looked at Liam, bleeding on the asphalt. She looked at Dominic, the man who had offered her a fortune, who had protected her, now kneeling in the mud waiting for an execution. If she ran, they both died. Chloe wrenched her arm out of Leo's grip. She didn't think about the danger. She didn't think about the guns. She reached into the pocket of her coat, her fingers wrapping around the heavy, cold steel of the spare Glock 19 Leo had left in the SUV's back seat, which she had grabbed in the chaos. She had never fired a gun in her life. "Chloe, don't!" Leo hissed. But Chloe stepped out from behind the shipping container, raising her hands into the air, the gun dangling loosely from one finger. "Stop!" Chloe screamed, her voice tearing through the fog, raw and echoing. "I'm the one you want! I'm here!" All eyes turned to her. Silas's smile widened into something monstrous. Dominic squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a roar of absolute agony. "Chloe, no," Dominic whispered. "Well, well," Silas purred, stepping away from Dominic and walking toward her. The little guardian angel steps into the light. The gravel crunched beneath Silas Moretti's expensive loafers as he closed the distance between them. The fog seemed to part for him. A theatrical entrance for a man who traded in fear. Chloe stood her ground, her knees shaking so violently she thought she might collapse. "Drop it, little bird," Silas commanded, gesturing to the heavy Glock dangling from her index finger. "Before you hurt yourself." Chloe let the gun slip from her grip. It hit the wet asphalt with a heavy, metallic thud. She raised her hands higher, the freezing rain mixing with the tears on her cheeks. "Chloe, don't do this!" Dominic roared from the mud, straining against the heavy zip ties binding his wrists. His stormy eyes were wild with a primal panic that sent a shiver down the spine of every man present. "Silas, she has nothing to do with this. Take me." "Oh, I'm going to take you, Dominic," Silas sneered, not looking back. "But first, I'm going to break the thing that put you back together." Silas stopped less than 2 feet from Chloe. He was tall, reeking of expensive cigars and metallic blood. He reached out, his leather-clad fingers wrapping brutally around her jaw, forcing her to look up into his dead, shark-like eyes. "You have a lot of nerve, waitress," Silas whispered, his thumb pressing painfully into her cheek. "My men tell me you sliced his chest open with a paring knife. A regular Florence Nightingale. Let my brother go," Chloe said, her voice trembling but her gaze refusing to drop. Silas laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "You're not in a position to make demands." He drew a sleek, silver combat knife from his overcoat pocket, pressing the cold, flat edge against Chloe's throat. "I'm going to make him watch." But Silas had made a fatal miscalculation. He assumed Chloe was just a terrified civilian. He didn't know that for the past 5 days, she had been a prisoner in a gilded cage, changing bandages with a pair of heavy surgical trauma shears she had kept tucked in the deep pocket of her peacoat. And he didn't realize that as a top-tier nursing student, she knew exactly how fragile the human body was. As Silas leaned in to press the blade closer to her throat, his overcoat fell open, exposing his neck. Chloe didn't hesitate. She didn't think about the moral weight of what she was about to do. She thought of Liam, battered on the concrete. She thought of Dominic, kneeling in the dirt, ready to die for her. With a surge of adrenaline that rivaled the night at the diner, Chloe dropped her left hand, plunging into her pocket. Her fingers found the heavy plastic grips of the trauma shears. In one fluid, desperate motion, she yanked them out and drove the blunt, angled metal tip upward, directly into the soft hollow beneath Silas's jawline, striking the carotid artery with terrifying, textbook precision. Silas's eyes bulged in absolute shock. He dropped his knife, his hands flying to his neck as a geyser of bright arterial blood erupted between his fingers. He stumbled backward, his mouth opening in a silent scream as his brain was instantly starved of oxygen. The shipyard froze in stunned disbelief. "Now, Leo!" Dominic bellowed. The paralysis broke. Before Silas even hit the ground, Leo snatched the Glock. Chloe had dropped and opened fire on the distracted Moretti men. Chaos exploded. In the confusion, Dominic, who had been discreetly sawing his zip ties against a jagged piece of rusted metal on the ground, snapped his restraints. He didn't run for cover. He lunged like a wounded tiger directly at Vincent Rossi. The traitor barely had time to raise his weapon before Dominic's hands closed around his throat, a brutal crack echoing beneath the roar of gunfire. Chloe scrambled backward, slipping on the wet asphalt, crawling blindly toward the shipping containers. Suddenly, strong arms wrapped around her. She screamed, thrashing wildly until a familiar scent of sandalwood and dark coffee enveloped her. "I've got you," Dominic rasped, pulling her tight against his bleeding chest, shielding her with his body as the last of Silas's men were gunned down by Leo's returning reinforcements. "I've got you, Chloe. You're safe." The gunfire faded into the heavy fog, replaced by the groans of the dying and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Dominic pulled back, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs wiping away the mixture of rain and Silas's blood on her skin. He looked at her with a reverence that took her breath away. A few yards away, Leo hauled a weeping, battered Liam to his feet. "You came for me," Chloe whispered, her hands clinging to Dominic's ruined shirt. "I would burn the entire city down for you," Dominic swore, his stormy eyes locking onto hers, burning with an intense, possessive fire. He pressed his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "You saved me twice, Chloe Bennett. My life belongs to you." 2 weeks later, the rain had finally stopped. The Castellano Syndicate had absorbed the remnants of the Moretti territory, cementing Dominic's reign as the undisputed king of Chicago. Liam was on a private jet to a rehabilitation center in Switzerland, funded by a newly opened offshore account. Chloe stood on the balcony of the East Wing suite, watching the sunrise paint the horizon in strokes of gold and peach. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. The guards at her door were gone. She could leave whenever she wanted. A pair of strong, warm arms slipped around her waist from behind, pulling her back against a hard chest. Dominic rested his chin on her shoulder, pressing a soft kiss to the side of her neck. "Thinking about running away, Nurse Bennett?" he murmured. Chloe leaned back into his embrace, covering his scarred hands with her own. She looked at the sprawling estate, the dangerous world she had tumbled into, and the man who ruled it all. "No," Chloe said softly, turning her head to capture his lips in a fierce, binding kiss. "I'm exactly where I belong." In the end, survival in the shadows isn't about avoiding the darkness. It's about finding the person who makes the dark feel like home. Chloe stepped out of her ordinary life to save a dying man, only to discover a dangerous world where she was the true royalty. Love, like a bullet, strikes without warning, irrevocably altering the trajectory of two lives bound by blood, loyalty, and an unexpected, fierce devotion.